Well, I'm sitting with Ted Filer, who was born in 1930 at Harp Close Road in Sudbury. His mother worked for Vanners, and his father was a mat maker for Arms, the coconut mat makers in the Cornard Road. And Ted has been involved with silk and making and manufacturing, designing ties, all his working life. So perhaps you'd like to tell us, Ted, how you first got involved at Vanners Silks.
Well, my mother came home one day from the factory. She worked as a weaver at Vanners, and she said they're starting up the design department again, because it was closed down during the war, obviously, because they were just making parachute silk. And I took some of my artwork down to Mr. Kipling and showed him, and he said, yes, I just think you'll be very, very good in the design department. He said to help us get started again. So I got the job, just like that.
Yes, and your mother had been called back to Vanners in the Second World War to help make parachutes, which was a critical thing. Yes.
That was just in the afternoons,
yes,
which they let her have the morning to herself to get
everything
to run the house, you know.
Yes.
But that was just afternoons.
But you loved drawing, and you would have been very happy to be a commercial artist.
Yes, that's what I'd like to be, yeah.
So in a way, designing and working on ties and similar silk fabrics has been a job of your dreams, in a way.
Yeah, that was the nearest to it, you know. That it wasn't big commercial artwork, it was just tie designs, and that was very nice. And I like working with miniature things anyway, so Vanners did all the small motive work, like the Oxford and Cambridge colleges, designed all their shields and wove them onto the silk for them to be made up into ties for the colleges.
Yes, and here are some of the ties you have helped to design. Would you like just to tell us what they represent and everything?
Well, that one was the Suffolk crest.
Right.
So that was designed on the various colour backgrounds, navy, green, and maroon.
Yes.
That one is obviously this Borough of Sudbury crest.
Right.
That was woven by Vanners.
Yes.
For the staff.
Right.
Of the councillors, in other words, for councillors.
Yes.
Well, civilians weren't allowed to wear it, and it's only for councillors. But later on, I noticed now most of the council workers do wear it.
Yes.
Yeah, and that one is one that I did of the B-17s. We had B-17 bombers in Sudbury.
Yes.
I designed that one when I was at Stephen Walters.
Right.
And
so something you told me, Ted, is that you have to design everything on 45 degrees.
Yeah, 45 degrees. Yeah,
yes.
you design on point paper on 45 degrees because the ties are cut on 45-degree bias.
Yes.
You don't just cut straight across the cloth, it has to be cut on a 45-degree, so the tie hangs nicely when it's made up.
Yes, it's a very complex process, and the tie you're going to tell us about now is even more special because, well, give the story of this particular tie.
Yes, that was a tie that was done for... it was something for the Heart Fest, something to do with Terry Wogan and
Gorbachev?
the Heart Foundation,
Right.
And the ties were made, and one tie was sent to President
Reagan.
Reagan, that's right, President Reagan, and one to President Gorbachev of Russia.
Yes, and this was quite a limited edition. They only made a few of these, didn't they?
Yes, they only made a few because they were only done to send one to President Reagan and one to Gorbachev.
Right,
and there was one or two left over. And as I designed the thing on for
Yes.
them to be woven, they
Yeah.
gave me a tie
Lovely.
as well. So there was only me and President Reagan, sorry, Reagan and
And it
Gorbachev who
Yes.
wore the same tie.
It celebrates this very special
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
when Russia and America
Yeah,
drew
that
together.
was trying to get peaceful
And-
negotiations.
And
yeah.
the Cold War was coming to an end.
That's right.
Yeah. So Ted, you worked at Vanna's where they had jacquard looms, and then after a while you went to Stephen Walters and helped them to introduce jacquard looms
That's correct.
and design ties and all manner of things there, things for the Saudi royal family, linings for wardrobes and things, I think you told me.
Oh yes, well that's when I went freelance,
Right.
and I used to get work from different sources, and one fella had a contract to do material for a Saudi Arabian palace,
Right.
and it was to be done in 100% quality silk, pale blue silk, and it was to line wardrobes and walls and cupboards and all that sort of thing for this Saudi Arabian palace.
Yes.
And it was a huge design of fountains and cherubs and all that sort of thing, a really big thing. And when I had to design it, I had to get a photograph taken of the actual things, the photographs of the cherubs and fountains and everything, to reduce it down small enough to put on my epidioscope to project
Yes.
onto the point paper to draw the whole pattern out.
Yes.
And then from drawing out on the point paper, you have to paint the different squares in. If it's single colour, you just paint a dark blue on a light blue paper and paint all the artwork
Yes.
in pale blue on all the squares. And the squares on the paper were divided up into half-inch squares, and within that half-inch square, it was divided 8 times down and 8 times across, and that was maximum quality. But it was never done maximum quality because the silk would have been too tight. It wouldn't have been flexible enough.
No.
So we used to do about eight warp threads down one way and maybe 6 threads the other way, and it produced a nice softer material.
Well, no, it's fantastic that you worked on such material and that Sudbury became renowned, and your work became renowned for supplying some of the best produced silk products of the 20th and early 21st century. But there was something else, Ted, that you also painted, and that was the jacket of some of the people who were flying from here in the Second World War. And you recalled the American Air Force arriving here in the 1940s. I think one Sunday you heard a great noise overhead. And what did you see when you looked up?
Well, there was 4 squadrons of Liberator bombers,
Yes.
B-24s, circling the town, ready to land on Wallingford Airfield.
Yeah. They were the first ones to come to the airfield.
Yeah, they were the first ones. After a time, the speeds of the Liberators and the Fortresses was not compatible, so they couldn't go out as one force.
Right.
The Liberators had their job to do because of their speed, and the B-17 Flying Fortresses had their job because the speeds were different. They couldn't all congregate over the target at the same time.
But you began to make friends with some of the brave American Air Force pilots and crew who were at Chiltern Airfield, and you painted a picture on some of their flying jackets.
Yes, I painted usually a Liberator and a Fortress on the backs of their A2. They were the A2 flying jackets. They weren't the big, heavy, furry ones. They were they're light
Yes.
leather ones. And I painted several of those on for them.
And you have subsequently met one of the pilots or their family who has given you one of those jackets back after all these years.
Yes, that's right.
You went over to America. Yes.
It's now it's Ray Garrett, his name, and he came back to Sudbury because he used to like this area, and he brought his leather jacket with him that I'd painted during the war, during the war, and we presented it to the town.
Yes. When you said painted, Ray, it's a painting on the back of the jacket, isn't it?
Yes, it's on the back of the jacket. Yeah, a fortress and a liberator on the back, and there are also little rows of 30 little yellow bombs on the front of it, because that was one bomb for every mission they did, and they had to do 30 missions before they could go back to the States.
And he flew 30 missions, and I think before one of them went back to the States, you wondered if you could buy his watch from him, and what did he reply?
Oh, I asked him if he could get me a watch in the States. If I gave him the money,
yes,
when he got back to the States, would he get all those watches for me? Because what good watches in this country during the war were very, very scarce. And he said, well, what sort do you want? So he took his watch off, which is this one. And he said, well, if I get you one, something like that would be okay. So I said, yes, that'd be lovely. He said, well, look, he said, I think it's your birthday coming up shortly, isn't it? So I said, yes, it is. And he said, well, you put that, you have my watch, he says, to remember me by that watch.
So this is the watch
and this
the American serviceman gave to you, and so it now must be 70 years old or more, and it still keeps perfect time.
Perfect time.
And the name of the servant, do you remember the name of the pilot who gave it to you?
Yeah, John Ross.
John Ross.
He was one of the gunners.
Right.
And he, when he gave it to me, I said, well, I can't take your watch, John. And he said, oh, yes, you can. He said, I've got another one in my locker, and he had a proper gold one in his locker, so he insisted that I have his watch.
Wonderful.
He said, you remember me by that watch, which I still do.
Well, every day I would think when you look at it, yes.
Yeah.
What a wonderful, wonderful memory. Yes. And you remember that East House was like a canteen for the American servicemen.
That's right.
Yes.
The American Red Cross canteen. Yeah.
Yes. And when you were working on the school allotments, you would sometimes see the planes coming back.
Oh yes, you could see them come up from the runways and land, and I used to watch them back sometimes when they were coming back from a raid. If they had an early morning raid, they'd be back by about mid-morning till lunchtime,
yes,
and I'd watch them all come in, and I used to watch for the crew I knew, which their plane was 2SF.
Right.
That was their code letters, and I used to watch for it, and I used to see it sometimes, and knew they got back safe.
And you would know that the crew that you had become friends with had landed safely. Yes.
Yeah, I knew the gunners and half the pilots and navigators from the other. Other ships.
How did you get to know them, Ted? Because were you allowed into the airbase, or did you meet the pilots outside?
Well, I was standing on the. I was sitting on my bicycle on the nearest dispersal point to 2S Squadron at the top of Gallows Hill.
Yes.
And they were getting out the plane one day, and they beckoned me over. And they wanted to show me the Liberator bomber. I didn't go right in it, but as the bomb bay doors were open underneath, you could walk in, you could see all the inside of the Liberator bomber. And they said they'd like me to come up to see them, you know. So they told me where they were living, because all the huts and the crews were dispersed all around Acton and Wallingfield.
Right.
They weren't on the base at all, they were dispersed.
I see. So that meant, yes.
That's right. So if the place got bombed, anything, that they wouldn't lose any crews. They'd be dispersed out in the countryside. So they told me where they lived, and I used to go up and see them quite regular.
Yes.
And I'd bring their shoes down, or boots down to the Sudbury cobblers to get them mended for them. And I was errand boy for Brinkley's Bakers in North Street during the war too, and I used to get them cakes and buns and whatnot to take up to them.
Yes.
Because I was errand boy.
So did the bakers give you a bicycle to ride on, or?
Oh yes, I had a heavy old trade bike with a big basket on the front.
A big trade bike.
And I used to have to do deliveries on it. No, I was only I wasn't very robust in those days, but it was a damn great bike, a heavy bike for me to push around. Yeah. But I managed.
Yeah. Did it have the name of the baker on the front of it, or
no? I think there was a
on the side.
Hanging off the crossbar was a plate with the name of the baker on the painted on the plate.
Yes.
That's what I remember.
And what was the name of the baker again? It was
Tom Brinkley.
Brinkley.
It was Oakley's bakery actually. The Sudbury people who owned it, but it was Mr. Oakley. That he sold his business to Tom Brinkley from Bury St Edmunds.
Right. Yes.
And I used to. Mr. Brinkley asked me would I still carry on being errand boy for him, and that's how it worked out.
Yeah. Going right back to your boyhood, early Sudbury, you told me that you lived up on the Mount.
That's correct.
Near the Masonic Hall. And just as a glimpse into Sudbury of the 1930s, I think you lived in number 19 or 20.
Oh, I lived with my parents at number 20.
Yes.
And my aunt lived in number 19 next door, and she moved into a house in Gainsborough Road.
Right.
And of course this house was empty, so I asked the landlord if I was courting a girl from Bury St Edmunds at the time, and I asked if we could have the house. Houses were very scarce to get. I mean, some of the chaps were living in huts when they came back from the war.
Yes, yes.
And so we had a good chance to have this house. Yeah. So that's why we got married early. Yes. I was only 20 when I got married. I got married in 30th of June. I wasn't 21 till August the 21st.
Well, no, but the chance to get a house was important.
Oh, yes, that was very good, yes. Very lucky to have it, to have a house.
And again, as a glimpse into the times, when you were a lad, there was just one toilet to 3 houses.
Yeah, that's correct, yes. And up the Mount that was.
No electricity or oil lamps?
No, there was oil lamps at the time, but my father did have electricity later on after the war.
Yes.
You know, we had gas mantles up to that time, and gas rings to boil a saucepan on, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. But we did have electricity laid on.
Yes. Something else that your dad did was to be a sometime projectionist at the Gainsborough Cinema.
Yeah, he did in his younger days, he did, yes. Yeah. He was a projectionist.
And you recall the days when everybody used to smoke, and tell what the inside of the cinema was like.
Oh, that was a complete fog. Both cinemas, the county and the Gainsborough, the rays from the projectors was like a huge, thick searchlight beam right down to the screen. You know, there was so much smoke in the air.
Yeah. And I think your dad found it very hot in the projectionist's booth, and he had to open a window in the top. which was quite difficult for him or
Yeah,
dangerous.
but there was also a sliding open roof on the top of the Gainsborough Cinema.
Right.
And Dad's job was to go and close this at night if it had been opened. And he says that was so flimsy, he thought any night he might end up in the seats in the cinema itself, and he'd go through this wall, this little trapdoor that was in whatnot.
But we should say for younger people that the Gainsborough was in East Street, sort of just, well, in East Street, just beside where...
It's still standing.
Yes,
it's
it
still
is.
standing.
Yes.
There's a nightclub now,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Nightclub.
And-
And opposite there was a wooden building that looked like a black barn, actually, and that's where the generator was in there to generate the electricity to run the cinema.
Right. Did the films ever break down when your dad was showing them, or I think some of
Well,
the...
they obviously do break down occasionally,
Yes,
but my father knew how to join the film.
right.
They had to put the film on a small machine and use what they call amyl acetate.
Right.
You could buy from the chemist. You could buy amyl acetate from the chemist, and rejoin the film with amyl acetate,
Right.
and it sort of welded the celluloid of the film together.
Yes.
So they could put the spools back on the projector and carry on with the film.
Well, it's a good job your dad knew how to do it.
Yeah, oh yeah, he knew how to do it all right. Yeah. He used to do it for me when I had a projector of my own later years. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you also used to go to the county cinema, and just describe that, because it was a little different to the Gainsborough cinema, I think.
Yeah, that was the Gainsborough Cinema, which wasn't too well built. In fact, I think I remembered Father telling me once that when they were building it, they hadn't got it complete, and so the face fell off, the plaster fell off the front of it.
Yeah.
So they had to repair that before they could open the cinema. Oh dear, but the county cinema was a different proposition. It was a purpose-built. I remember as a little boy watching it being built.
Right.
And it was a very nice cinema.
Yes.
It had all nice thick padded stairs up to the balcony both sides, you know,
Yes.
and it was very sumptuous.
I think, yes, sumptuous is a good word, and
Yeah,
it was a restaurant.
Yeah,
and-
the steps going up, well, I don't know why they made it so elaborate, really. I mean,
Yeah.
they really were thick and soft, you know, as you went up the balcony steps.
Yes.
That was threepence in the balcony and twopence downstairs.
Yeah. And you really loved the cinema.
Oh, yeah, I used to love the cinema, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Used to live there practically.
Well, amongst many other things. that
Yeah,
you
that's
did.
how I got into music and knew so many musical tunes and whatnot from the Hollywood films and things.
Yes, because
Then going on to be a musician and whatnot, and I knew all so many tunes.
And we've had a lovely chat, Ted, and we've only got a limited amount of time, but it might be nice if you perhaps talk just a little bit about the Memorial Flight logo that you designed for 41.
Yeah, I designed that for
Perhaps
the
if-
people at
yes.
Duxford and
Shall we show it to the camera? Yes.
the people at Duxford, the Sally B,
Right.
which
yes.
is still flying on air shows today, isn't it?
Yes.
I did that design for Sally B for them,
Yeah.
and that was used on the shoulder of the crew
Right.
and anything else, because they had a dodgy engine on the port engine. Inner engine was a bit ropey, and they wanted enough money as they could raise to keep the engine running, so
Yes.
it could go into air shows.
Yes.
But
It must make you feel very proud when you walk along the street and you see somebody wearing one of your ties, or you go to a reunion and someone's got a shoulder lapel on or shoulder badge that you've actually designed and helped to make.
Yeah.
You must think, yes,
Yeah.
I designed it, yes.
Yeah, but they were initially done for the air crew, actually.
Yes,
The air crew and the ground crew.
yes.
They'd be smaller than that,
Mm.
really. But,
And there's another one you've bought here in a frame. Tell us about this one.
well, this one is
Can you show it to the camera? Yeah.
that was produced. It's woven all in jacquard silk.
Right.
It's just the ultimate, you could most say, of jacquard weaving, picture weaving.
Yes.
It's woven by a firm called Bruff, Nicholson and Hall in Staffordshire,
Right.
and that's about the ultimate of
Right.
textile weaving.
And is this your design?
No, I didn't design it.
Oh,
No,
you didn't design this.
no, I didn't design it. Bruff, Nicholson and Hall
Okay.
designed it,
Yeah.
and
But
a traveller gave that
Okay.
sample
Yes.
to me one day when I was in the design department.
So it's an example of how
Yeah,
incredibly intricate jacquard.
it's the Laughing Cavalier,
Yes,
and the Laughing
absolutely.
Cavalier. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. But I think we'd rather end with something that you actually designed. So let's sort of perhaps end with this depiction. And I think you told me that doing something that is circular is a bit of a challenge to...
Oh, to weave.
Yes,
Yes, because the looms were about 5 foot
right,
wide,
yes,
and to get every circle on anything circular right from the very edge of the cloth to the centre of the cloth was very difficult at times.
yes,
There was mechanical means of correcting if a circle became a bit oval. We could mechanically do something to the jacquard cards
yes.
to get the thing circular again.
Yes. Well, Ted, you have really summed up the significance of silk to Sudbury. I mean, the 4 silk factories are absolutely the core of Sudbury's industrial and sort of artistic heritage, really.
Mhm.
And you worked in silk all your life,
Yeah.
and you clearly live and dream it still today. And you were born in Sudbury, you've got these wonderful memories, you recall the Second World War. So thank you very, very much for talking to us for the Museum Trust for the Future. Thank you, Ted.
That's quite a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.